And welcome into the Rowdy Studios. My name is Bassmasters. That's Buzz Cutler. Bob Pockers is seen daily in the middle. Now, later on today's show, on the podcast, Bob will tell us why we're full of it. But for right now, Bob...
I usually tell you why you're full of it, but
yes,
I'll
true.
be very specific of why you're full of it.
For today, tell us why Clint Bowyer is full of it in his move to MWR.
Full of it?
Oh, it's the best thing ever.
You know, I mean, sometimes change is good, right?
Thank you, Clint. Now,
But he was also very clear. He said, well, I took this thing to Richard Childress, and I showed him the offer, and he showed me the numbers, and I said, uh-oh, I'm in trouble. I mean, he said that.
Yeah, I mean, and, you know, you look at the numbers. Clint Bowyer has 4 career Cup wins. Michael Waltrip Racing, 2. So how is this a good move compared to where he's at? And obvious that, you know, he's taking somewhat of a risk. I mean, he didn't necessarily have much of a choice after things fell apart with Richard Childress Racing, but he's certainly taking a risk in the sense of he's not going to be with an organization.
This is not a top-tier team. This is not a top-4 team. Right
there are 2 ways this could go. Clint Bowyer could help elevate that team, or that team could pull down Clint Bowyer.
It can go both those ways.
Which is more likely?
It can go both those ways. He can elevate them a little, and they can pull him down.
I think that I probably agree with Bass over there, yeah. Bass, Buzz, Bass, Buzz.
Bass, Buzz, Bob.
Kind of like how I, you know, kind of pull up to you guys, but maybe your quality of your work kind of comes down a little bit.
Down.
Well,
that's right.
Ty Norris told you it was a leap of faith on Clint's part. Isn't that just a nice way of saying, yeah, he sort of, you know, took a demotion?
Well, I mean,
Wait a minute. It's a rebuilding situation.
This is
right?
They're still building.
Okay.
But if you're Michael Waltrip Racing, and you know you have Napa coming up for renewal after 2012, you have Aaron's coming up for renewal after 2012, you need to do something to convince them beyond the performance right now at Truex and Ruderman that Michael Waltrip Racing is a place we're staying at. So I think you bring in a guy like Bowyer, you may give him a better deal, maybe take a risk financially to get Bowyer to see if he can elevate your game in order to keep the organization with the sponsors that it has. I think, you know, this is a much it's a big move for Michael Waltrip Racing in their future.
Yeah, I mean, pushing a lot of chips into the mold.
Exactly, because you know, can you really expect Martin Truex Jr., you know, to all of a sudden have great second half of races or great first half of races? Because Martin Truex seems to be a guy who
he shows flashes, but there's no consistency.
Right.
Is Bowyer to MWR the equivalent of Casey Kane to Red Bull? Is that sort of a good analogy?
Well, I mean,
that's probably the best you can hope.
A little bit, but I would say that would be only if Casey Kane was leaving Hendrick to go to Red Bull. leaving Richard Payne Motorsports to go to Red Bull.
So it's more of a Brian Vickers to Red Bull situation. Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, I would say that's probably a pretty good, accurate assessment.
Well, here's the thing I think that's got to be hard for Clint Bowyer and maybe some of these sponsors is I think that team has taken a step back this year. Would you agree with that?
Which team, Michael Waltrip?
Yes.
Yeah, I would say that their
they
performance.
Weren't gangbusters last year, but they're not as good this year as they were last year.
And I mean, when you watched him last year, you were like, okay, this is just a bad year for Martin Truex. He'll be challenging for a chase spot.
Ruderman had a great race at Chicagoland last year, and there was more flashes, I thought, more speed, I thought, last year than we've seen out of those guys this year.
And now they've made a huge switch on the competition end to, you know, changing a lot of their personnel.
Well, Scott Miller coming in, that's got to help. I mean, obviously it's not going to hurt.
Doesn't have to help.
Well, it'll help. Won't it help? It has to help, doesn't it, Bob?
You would think it. I mean, I don't know what else. I think bringing in a lot of people could have helped.
Right. Well, you bring in Scott Miller. You bring in Clint Bowyer. You've got TRD engines. Maybe you feel pretty good about those.
Right. I mean, TRD's doing the deal with Joe Gibbs.
Right. So maybe you feel a little bit better about what you got under the hood. They know they've got some work to do, and this is a step in that direction. And as you say, I don't know what Clint Bowyer's other options really were at this point when he took that deal to Richard, and he said he was surprised they weren't going to be able to put it together.
Yeah, and it's obvious that Roush couldn't put it together, and Gibbs apparently couldn't put it together. And this
was a deal for a second-tier team.
Yeah, I mean, this would be like going to the Milwaukee Brewers, right?
And they're doing
And look what they're
okay.
doing. Okay, yeah.
Yeah,
All
come
last
on,
night's
man.
game notwithstanding.
I would love to see a Brewers-Tigers World Series.
Well, you might get it. You just never know.
I don't think so.
Although I think Texas Rangers are pretty
Texas
good. All
are
right.
up
For
2-0.
Bob Pockris and Buzz Cutler, my name's Bassmasters. We'll see you next time. When Bob tells us, we're full of it. Right here on the Rowdy something or other.
Rowdy.com. Say it like it is.
Say what like it is?
Rowdy.com.